You are standing in your kitchen, reaching into the refrigerator for a slice of cold watermelon on a humid Tuesday afternoon. You feel that familiar, sticky dampness gathering behind your knees and across your forehead, and you probably think your body is failing you. You feel like a fragile, over-evolved primate who cannot handle a little bit of atmospheric pressure without a machine blowing chilled air in your face. But here is the reality. That tiny bead of moisture is a piece of biological engineering so advanced it makes a high-performance radiator look like a bucket of stagnant ice. You think you are struggling, but you are actually participating in the greatest thermal victory in the history of the planet. Everything you have been told about how humans survived the ancient world is fundamentally backwards. We were not the shivering wretches hiding from the sun. We were the ones who turned the sun into a sniper rifle. The first major lie you have likely been fed is that ancient humans were the ultimate underdogs of the savannah. You have seen the illustrations. A small, hairy, terrified group of bipeds cowering in the grass while lions and saber-toothed cats dominate the landscape. The logic goes that we were too slow to run away, too weak to fight, and too naked to be protected. This makes for a great triumph of the spirit story, but it is scientifically absurd. In reality, we were the most terrifying thing on the landscape, and we did not need fangs to prove it. We had the ability to move through a furnace. While it seems like walking on two legs was a gift for our hands, it was actually a thermal shield. In the 1980s, researcher Peter Wheeler conducted groundbreaking thermodynamic simulations of the African savanna. He found that a creature standing vertically on two legs exposes about 60% less of its body surface to the direct midday sun compared to a quadruped of the same size. If you are a zebra or a lion, your entire back is a solar panel, soaking up radiation at the hottest part of the day. If you are an early Homo erectus, the sun only hits your head and shoulders. But that is not even the best part. By lifting our torsos just 3 feet off the baking dirt, our ancestors entered a different world. The air near the ground is trapped by friction and heated by the earth. Just a few feet up, the air moves faster and stays significantly cooler. We did not stand up to see over the grass. We stood up to step out of the oven. So, standing up was the perfect solution to the heat. Except, it was actually a total disaster that should have killed us instantly. Standing up solved the radiation problem, but it created an even bigger issue. We started moving more. And moving in the heat creates internal metabolic fire. If you cannot get rid of that heat, your internal organs will literally cook until they reach the consistency of a poached egg. This is where the next great myth falls apart. The idea that humans lost their fur because it was unnecessary. If you look at every other primate, they are covered in thick, protective coats. You might think losing that fur was a way to stay cool. But for most animals, fur is actually a defense against the sun's radiation. It provides shade for the skin. When we dropped our fur, we exposed our bare, vulnerable skin to the UV rays of the equator. That is a death sentence unless you have a secondary system ready to go. We did not lose our fur to get cool. We lost it so that our sweat could actually work. Anthropologist Nina Jablonski has spent decades proving that our transition to nakedness was tied to the development of the most dense network of eccrine sweat glands in the animal kingdom. Most mammals have sweat glands, but they are usually the apocrine type, located in hairy areas and primarily used for scent signaling. We, however, have between 2 and 5 million eccrine glands. These are specialized pumps that move water and salt directly onto the surface of the skin. When that water evaporates, it performs a bit of physical magic called latent heat of vaporization. As the water molecule turns to gas, it consumes energy, and it takes that energy directly from your warm blood. We are the only animals on Earth that have turned our entire skin surface into a high-powered liquid-cooled engine. But if you cook but wait, if being a sweat box was such a great advantage, why didn't every other animal do it? Because being a sweating machine is incredibly expensive. It is a high-stakes gamble that almost always ends in death. To maintain that level of cooling, you need an incredible amount of water, sometimes up to 3 gallons a day in extreme conditions. If you are a gazelle, you cannot afford to waste that much water. You have to conserve it. This brings us to the myth that our ancestors stayed close to waterholes because they were home bases. The truth is that the water hole was a trap. Every predator in Africa knows that every herbivore eventually has to drink. If you hang out at the river, you are going to get eaten. Our ancestors survived because they were the first creatures to figure out how to carry the river with them. In places like the Deep Kloof Rock Shelter in South Africa, archaeologists have found ostrich eggshell fragments dating back over 60,000 years. These were not just garbage from a meal, they were decorated, engraved, and fitted with beeswax stoppers. These were the world's first high-tech canteens. By carrying water in ostrich eggs, humans could venture miles away from the dangerous riverbanks into the deepest, hottest parts of the desert where no lion would dare to follow. We use technology to bridge the gap between our high-demand biology and the arid reality of the world. Now, you might think that once we had water and a cooling system, we just sat in the shade and waited for the world to get cooler. But that is the biggest myth of all. We did not use our cooling system to hide from the heat. We used it to weaponize the sun. This is the concept of persistence hunting, popularized by researchers like Daniel Lieberman and Louis Liebenberg. Imagine it is the hottest part of the day, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Every predator is asleep in the shade, their brains on the verge of overheating. Even the fastest antelope is standing still, trying to pant away enough heat to survive. Then, out of the shimmering heat haze, a couple of humans appear. They are not running fast, they are just jogging. The antelope panics and bolts. It is much faster than the humans, so it disappears over the horizon. It finds a new bush, sits down, and tries to cool off. But 10 minutes later, those humans appear again. They are still jogging. They are still sweating. Their internal temperature is a rock-stable 98.6 degrees. The antelope, however, cannot sweat. It can only pant. And you cannot pant effectively while you are running. Every time the antelope moves, its temperature climbs. After 2 or 3 hours of this, the antelope's brain hits a critical limit. It experiences what is called thermal ataxia. It does not die from a wound. It dies because its brain has literally shut down from the heat. The humans walk up to a paralyzed, overheated animal and end the hunt. We did not survive the heat by being faster. We survived by being the only ones who did not have to stop. But having a cooling system for the body is one thing. Having a cooling system for the brain is another. This leads us to a fascinating piece of science called the radiator theory, proposed by Dean Falk. There is a common belief that we grew big brains because we started eating meat or using tools. But you cannot just grow a big brain. A brain is a massive energy hog. It uses 20% of your body's calories, and all that energy generates heat. If you try to run a massive, complex brain in the middle of a desert without a specialized cooling system, you will have a seizure and die within minutes. Falk argued that the expansion of the human brain was only possible because we first evolved a complex network of veins in the skull that act as a heat exchanger. Our scalps are some of the most heavily vascularized and sweat-prone areas of our body for a reason. We essentially built a specialized air conditioning unit around our skulls. Only after that radiator was in place did evolution have the permission to increase our brain size. We are not smart because we are special, we are smart because we are the only animals that figured out how to keep a high-powered processor from melting. So, our ancestors were these perfect thermal machines, optimized for the furnace. You would think that this would make us invincible. But as the climate shifted, the heat became an even more aggressive killer, moving from a daily inconvenience to a multi-generational crisis. This is where the next myth comes in, the idea that we survived the great droughts of Africa through sheer toughness. Biology can only take you so far. When the rains failed for decades at a time, the savanna turned into a wasteland. To survive this, our ancestors had to invent a new kind of social engineering called fission fusion dynamics. Most primates stay in one group for their entire lives. If the group is 30 individuals, it stays 30 individuals. But when resources are scarce and the heat is rising, A large group is a liability. It eats everything too fast. Humans learned to break apart into tiny family units during the dry season, scattering across the landscape like seeds. They would minimize their footprint, surviving on hidden tubers and moisture from deep roots. Then, when the rains returned, they would fuse back together into a massive tribe to share information and strengthen their bonds. This flexibility, the ability to change our social shape to match the climate, is something no other primate can do. We did not survive the heat by staying together, we survived by knowing when to walk alone. And while they were walking alone, they were using a tool that should have made their heat problem worse: fire. There is a common misconception that humans discovered fire to keep warm during the ice ages. That is a Eurocentric view of history. In reality, we were using fire in the tropics long before we ever saw snow. But why would you want a fire when it is already 100 degrees outside? Because fire is a digestive shortcut. Many of the plants that grow in extreme, arid environments protect their nutrients behind thick cell walls or toxic chemicals. They are heat-hardened. A human stomach cannot process a raw desert tuber that the heat breaks down the starches and neutralizes the toxins. This meant that our ancestors did not have to spend all day foraging in the sun. They could collect a few high-calorie roots in the morning, cook them in the shade, and get more energy in one meal than a chimpanzee gets in a week of chewing raw leaves. We used the heat of the fire to bypass the limitations of our own guts, giving us the extra energy we needed to fuel our massive, heat-sensitive brains. But even with fire, water, and social flexibility, there was a hidden war being fought inside ourselves, a war that you are still fighting today. To survive in the heat, your body has to be an absolute hoarder of two things: water and salt. When you sweat, you are not just losing water, you are losing sodium. In the ancient world, salt was incredibly rare. If your sodium levels dropped too low, your heart would stop beating. Evolution, therefore, favored humans who were genetically salty. We developed kidneys that are incredibly aggressive at reabsorbing sodium before it can be lost. We developed a taste for salt that is so powerful it borders on an addiction. In the Pleistocene, this was a life-saving adaptation. If you found a salt lick or a mineral spring, your body would scream at you to eat as much as possible to prepare for the next heat wave. This was our internal shield against dehydration and electrolyte collapse. However, the reality of this survival mechanism has a dark side that most people completely misunderstand. We are told that modern health problems like high blood pressure and heart disease are purely the result of bad choices or processed food. But that is a myth. The reason we have these problems is that our bodies are still waiting for a drought that is never coming. We are tropical survivors living in a world of abundance. Those same genes that allowed your ancestors to survive a 3-day trek through the Kalahari without collapsing are the ones that now cause your blood pressure to spike when you eat a bag of chips. We are built to hold on to salt like it is gold, because for 2 million years, it was. Your modern medical chart is just a map of how well your ancestors survived the furnace. This internal biology also explains the myth of the generalist. We like to think that humans are the ultimate generalists, able to live anywhere from the Arctic to the Amazon. But if you look at our physiology, that is a lie. We are extreme specialists. We are a tropical, heat-adapted species that has learned how to cheat at living in the cold. If you take a naked human and a naked husky and put them both in a room that is 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the human will be dead in hours. The husky will be fine. But if you put them both in a room that is 110 degrees, the husky will be dead in 30 minutes. And the human will just be bored and looking for a drink. Our entire expansion across the planet was driven not by our ability to handle the cold, but by our ability to outwork the heat. When Homo sapiens moved into Europe and met the Neanderthals, we did not win because we were better hunters or more violent. We won because of the radiator theory in action. Neanderthals were cold-adapted. They were short, stocky, and heavily muscled. Those muscles were great for wrestling mammoths, but they were a massive thermal liability. A Neanderthal's body generated so much internal heat that they had to consume up to 5,000 calories a day just to keep their systems running. In a fluctuating climate, where the summers were getting longer and the forests were turning into open plains, the Neanderthals were literally overheating. They could not travel long distances to find food because their bodies would hit a thermal ceiling. Homo sapiens, with our long, lean limbs and our millions of sweat glands, could walk circles around them. We could forage over a much larger area for a much lower thermal cost. We did not outthink the Neanderthals, we outsweated them. We were the high-efficiency economy cars of the primate world, and they were the gas-guzzling tanks that ran out of fuel when the temperature climbed. And yet, we still look at ourselves in the mirror today and see something fragile. We see the sweat as a sign of weakness or a lack of fitness. We have been conditioned by a century of air conditioning to believe that the natural state of a human is to be perfectly dry and 72 degrees. But that is the most dangerous myth of all. When you avoid the heat, you are essentially letting a 2-million-year-old engine go to rust. Scientific studies on heat acclimation have shown that the human body is incredibly plastic. If you spend just 2 weeks exposed to high temperatures, your body undergoes a radical transformation. Your plasma volume expands, allowing your heart to pump more blood to your skin with less effort. Your sweat glands actually change their chemical output, learning to secrete more water while retaining more salt. Your heat shock proteins, the cellular chaperones that keep your proteins from unfolding, become more reactive and more efficient. We are designed to be stressed by the sun. It is the environment our DNA expects. When you look at the challenges we face in the future, the rising global temperatures and the changing climate, there is a tendency to fall into despair, to think that we are a species that cannot handle the fire we have built. But history tells a different story. We are the only species that has ever looked at a lethal environment and said, I can work with this. We did not just survive the heat, we turned it into our primary advantage. We are the architects of the midday sun. Every time you feel that trickle of sweat during a workout or a walk to your car, you are experiencing a direct link to the hunters who tracked kudus for 20 miles under a white-hot sky. You are feeling the same cooling mechanism that allowed your ancestors to grow the very brain you are using to process these words. That moisture is the mark of an apex thermal predator. It is the reason you have the luxury of sitting in a cooled room today, wondering about the past. So, let's stop the myth that we are vulnerable. We were never the victims of the African sun. We were the only ones who truly mastered it. We are a tropical species that conquered the globe not by fighting the climate, but by becoming its most efficient passenger. You are currently walking around in a biological suit that is designed to thrive in conditions that would kill almost any other mammal on this planet. You aren't surviving the heat wave. You are the heat wave. The reality of your existence is that you are the descendant of a long line of champions who refused to seek the shade. They stood up when everyone else stayed down. They lost their protection to gain a superpower. They turned their skin into a radiator and their sweat into a weapon. They carried the ocean in eggshells and they ran until the world stopped breathing. You carry all of that history in every pore of your skin. You think you are a modern person who needs a cold drink and a fan to make it through July. But the truth is, your ancestors would look at you and see a high-performance machine that is currently idling in a parking lot. You were forged in a furnace, built from the salt of the earth, and designed to keep walking when the sun is trying to turn the world to ash. Stop acting like the sun is your enemy. It is the anvil you were hammered on, and you are far tougher than the fire that made you. You are the ultimate thermal survivor, and quite frankly, the heat isn't nearly as worried about you as you should be about it. It is easy to forget that the comforts of our modern world are just a thin veneer over a very different biological reality. We have built a world that tries to hide our nature from us, but our nature is persistent. It shows up in our cravings for salt, in our ability to endure long runs, and in the way our bodies react when the air gets heavy. We aren't a species that is new to this planet's problems. We are the veterans. We have seen the lakes dry up and the forests burn, and we are still here, sweating and thinking. The next time the temperature climbs and you feel that familiar dampness, don't reach for the thermostat with a sense of defeat. Stand in it for a second. Feel the wind on your skin. That is the feeling of 2 million years of engineering working exactly the way it was intended. You aren't breaking down, you are powering up. You are the master of the furnace, and you always have been. You're not a fragile creature hiding from the summer. You're the only thing on this planet that can run a marathon in it while everyone else is hiding in the bushes. And that is the final truth of the matter. We have spent thousands of years trying to build a world where we don't have to sweat, but we only have the intelligence to build that world because our ancestors spent millions of years sweating in the first place. You can try to hide from the heat all you want, but your DNA is still waiting for the hunt. You aren't struggling with the temperature because you're weak. You're struggling because you've forgotten that you were built to conquer it. You are a biological radiator designed for the extremes, so stop complaining about the humidity and start realizing that you are the most advanced cooling system the universe has ever produced. If you can't handle a little bit of sun, you are the only one in your entire family tree who couldn't, and they didn't have iced lattes to help them out. You are the child of the furnace, and it's time you started acting like it.